Alright, we're at the Texas Theater. 4 days in Dallas. JFK with Oliver Stone. How's it going, man? Oh, sorry, Bevan. Now showing JFK, Kevin Costner.
Hey everybody! How's it going? I'm Jason Ryan with the Texas Theater. Thank you so much for being here. 15 years we've been trying to get Oliver to come down here. So we very much appreciate you guys being here for probably a once-in-a-lifetime moment to watch JFK with director Oliver Stone with the director's cut. So pretty good. Pretty good. I would be remiss if we didn't introduce you to the guy that put it all together. Film critic and film writer, Matt Zoller Seitz. Can we give him a round of applause, please?
Good evening, everybody. Are you ready for 206 minutes of unrelenting paranoia and political catharsis? Are you ready to deconstruct the perils of the military-industrial complex as articulated in a 10-minute unbroken monologue by the late great Donald Sutherland? Are you ready to see John Candy eat entire yards of scenery? Are you ready to see Ed Asner beat a dude with a gun? Well, I'm ready for all of these things. I am so very, very happy that this event happened, and oh my God, look at this crowd. What a beautiful bunch of people you are. I'm sure you're all somehow played a part in the conspiracy, but we won't investigate. We're just here to observe and take notes. So Oliver is going to be joining us afterwards. We're going to have a Q&A up here on this stage. And since it is a long movie, I think we're just going to get it rolling. And here we go with JFK.
One last housekeeping note, because some of you that have been here before for Q&As know that we often do audience participation questions. We're not doing that tonight because it's such a long movie. But if you want to try to get a question in, you can go to our Instagram and submit it. We're gathering some questions to give to Matt during the Q&A, so give that a shot. But anyway, thanks for coming so much. Have a good time.
Over, guys.
Let's get right to it. Let's bring up Matt Zoller Seitz and Oliver Stone, director of the film as well.
So how's it feel to be back in Dallas?
Well, it's nice, only for this weekend, but it's been... Actually, I walked around this city this morning, and I couldn't recognize much. It's a lot of changes, but it was empty. It was like a Twilight Zone. It's like nobody was in the office buildings, and this is downtown. I guess I was in the wrong town or something.
Did you go to Dealey Plaza?
Yeah, but it's the same. I heard they were going to change it. I heard there was going to be reconstruction, but I don't see any sign of it yet.
You were 17 when Kennedy was assassinated, right?
Yes.
Tell me about your experience of that day.
Well, I was like everybody else. It was very solemn and very shocking, and we all watched television for 3 days. It was a bit like this film. I had no real insight because I didn't understand the world at that point. I was a boarding school boy, you know, and we were very patriotic, and it was a simpler time.
When did you first begin to think
I didn't know Mark Lane.
Well, I was going to say
Mark Lane jumped on it right away. What?
When did you start to ask what happened?
Frankly, I put it on my mind. I went to Vietnam, but my life continued on. Through the 1970s, I began to educate myself, and as the 70s went on, they were pretty, you know, there was a lot of radical thoughts out there. Was the Patty Hearst kidnapping, the kidnapper being a government informant. A lot of things were coming out of the woodwork, starting to come out of the woodwork. CIA, the Church Committee, the Richard Schweiker, a senator from Pennsylvania, made some tremendous revelations. Gary Hart, people like this. Frank Church was quite a hero. And the calls for these reforms were really strong. And 1980, with the Reagan Revolution, nothing really changed. It went back, swung back in another direction. And the CIA and the FBI continued and continued and continued. And here we are now into the next century, and you know what happened next. It only gets worse. I think there was some truth in what Costner said about the government you won't recognize anymore. I changed. Ellen Ray, those of you who know who she is, she's and her husband William Schaap were in New York City with a small publishing house. They put out these. They put out the original. Garrison wrote a book in '69 called Inheritance of Stone, something like that. I read it. It was dry, but then he put out a second. He put out a second book in 1987, roughly, which was called On the Trail of the Assassins. Ellen Ray gave me that book and insisted I read it, and she was really a persuasive lady. Believe me, she was at the trial. She knew a lot about it, and I read it finally. And although I was making Born on the 4th of July, and I was about to make The Doors, I optioned the book right as soon as I read it, which was months later, and I really thought this is a great thriller. I hadn't done the research. I just believed what I was saying was a great movie. It was a potentially great movie. So one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I was on the trail of the assassins, and I hired people to do a lot of research, and it got worse and worse. And you know, I had to make this movie. And so I learned as I went. And I got really educated. As you know, the film was tremendously controversial, and there was a lot of attacks, ad hominem attacks, and I felt really like I crossed over the Rubicon. You know, I was the enemy. But Jim was still around. He died shortly after the film came out, and of course it was Fletcher Prouty who was a key figure here. He was part of the character of Donald Sullivan, and a lot of people were supportive of me. A lot. Frank Mankiewicz came to our help. Many people, but we had so much opposition, and we tried very hard. We did a lot of press. I went to Washington, the National Press Club, with Fletcher. You know, and I told it as I saw it. I testified in front of a congressional committee, and they appointed this commission to the JFK Records Act, which led ultimately to the creation of the Assassination Records Review Board, which existed from 1993 on to 98 when the money ran out. And they did some serious investigating. They didn't have the full power of the subpoena power or anything like that, but they did have power. And they did some good work, some very good work, and all their work was difficult to understand unless you had a knowledge of these things. It was thrown out, and the media did a terrible job of reporting on it, just going with the most superficial analysis and saying, well, there's not much there. Well, in truth, there is a lot there. And I made another film called JFK Revisited about 3 years ago, was it? 4 years ago? Which I hope those of you who are interested see, because we did two versions, a 2-hour and a 4-hour version. But in there we go into much more detail, and we update the information that we have, which is very important because there was quite a lot more evidence now of the Oswald connection to the CIA. There's more evidence on the autopsies, more doctors, more people talked over time. We found out a lot, and it's all in that documentary, which I hope you can see. It's been a lifetime journey on this. I didn't realize I'd get hooked by it, but yeah, I feel very strongly that Garrison was correct. He was on the right trail.
I saw this, I'm raised here, and I saw this movie at the North Park 1 and 2, if anybody remembers. Greatest theater, aside from this one, in Dallas. And I was not born when Kennedy was assassinated, but this was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had, Oliver, was seeing that at the North Park 1 and 2 with a packed house. Because during the sequence where the assassination itself is deconstructed and the Zapruder film is shown and rewound and shown again, back and to the left, when he repeats back and to the left, a person in the front row of the theater began to sob. And suddenly it was like the entire theater was crying. And I thought, oh, through the power of art, I've been given a taste of what it must have been like to have lived through that day. And it made me think about, you've heard this quote, I'm sure, 1,000 times, but art can be a mirror, but it can also be a hammer. And I think this movie is both. I think it holds up a mirror to what we felt and what we continue to feel, but it's also a hammer in that, as you have pointed out, it has had actual practical effects, actual applications, like actual things have happened as a result of this movie. That's amazing.
Thank you. Roger Ebert, who was, I think, the best critic of America, and Roger Ebert, his review says it very well. He says, I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels right. It captures the mood of many of us felt in this country, and that's high praise for me.
You and I have talked about this, but I want to get into it again here. One of the raps against the film, and there were a lot of them, and it was astounding to see, and if those of you who were around at the time remember this, it was on the cover of Time and Newsweek simultaneously, and they both were treating it like it was the most dangerous film of all time. The nightly news was all over it. Cable news was all over it. It was nonstop. It was like, and I thought, oh my God, it was like the scene where they find out that the office has been bugged at JFK. It was like Oliver must be onto something if everybody is coming after him.
Not everybody, but the establishment press did, absolutely, and which makes me suspicious of the media ever since. It's very difficult to go back. There is an agenda. There is an agenda, and the government has a tremendous power in this country, has a tremendous say, and as you know, we know very well that the CIA is very involved with the press and has been involved and buys things and gets favors. And right now we're getting, most of the reportage we get is from the government. And that's a shame, because truly the alternative media is the only solution. And the government's fighting back and saying this is misinformation and disinformation and all that stuff, but this is to the contrary. This is so necessary to cleanse all the pollution that has accumulated in this river.
Well, one of the arguments against this movie as both politics and drama was that how can it be possible that Lyndon Johnson, the CIA, the FBI, the Mafia, the Cubans, Bell Helicopter, blah, blah, on and on and on, were all somehow involved. And I asked you, when we had our first conversation about this, is the movie actually saying that? Because I don't feel like it is.
No, I mean, I put the argument in the film. I knew this was going to come up, and I put the argument in, and I also put the argument in very clearly, I hope it got through, that Garrison had a weak case. It was very evident. He didn't really have the evidence on Shaw, but Shaw was lying, and he did have a record, and he was. The more we know about Shaw, certainly there is a New Orleans branch, there's a Dallas branch to this, and there's a Miami branch, which was the Cuban operation. I don't know how it all came together, but my sense is that it comes from the highest level. It had to, because even Alan Dulles and James Angleton, who were the two key guys at the CIA, could not go ahead without some approval, some agreement that Kennedy was dangerous to the whole structure of the United States, that a second term would be the most difficult period of all. He would really rock the boat, and he was already rocking it a little too much by the first withdrawal of 1,000. But so much more was going on, so much more. That's why you have to look at the new film. He was approaching everything with a fresh mind. Africa, Asia. He was talking to people like Nasser. He was breaking all the rules. He told Israel, in fact, you're not going to build a nuclear bomb, and he was very adamant about it. But he was assassinated in that period. There's so many things that are shocking and tell us where we are now. But I believe in impact. You asked about impact. This was not the first one. I mean, come on, when I did Platoon, people were shocked. They said they never understood the war from this angle, from an infantryman, from a grunt's point of view. The second film, Born on the 4th of July, pounded home the before the war and after the war with a paraplegic protagonist. That was a very powerful movie. My third one on Vietnam did not register the same way because it was about the Vietnamese side of it. But I always believed in impact cinema, try to make a movie that really hits. And boy, they hit back this time.
Heaven and Earth is the third one in that trilogy, and if you haven't seen it, you should. Let's talk a little bit about the style of the film, which is the first Sight and Sound poll that I ever participated in. It was like, basically it was the 10 greatest films ever made. And everybody has their own rationale for what they put on there, but my rationale was, what are the 10 movies that changed movies? And JFK was one of the ones on that list. I don't think movies were edited the same way after JFK. There had been stirrings of that, and you had been responsible for it, and I think you see glimmers of it in The Doors and even Born on the 4th of July. But here, holy shit, Oliver. I mean, this is unreal. What you and your editors and Robert Richardson are doing here. Talk about that a little bit, if you can.
Well, put it this way, I realized as we were going along that this was a kamikaze mission. I'd always, I came late to filmmaking. I was 40, I was about 40 years old when Platoon hit, and I'd been struggling as a screenwriter, as a director. I made Salvador, I made The Hand. Salvador got me in a bridge with an English company. No American company would support Platoon. No American company would support it. And we had to finance it very, very sparsely out of England, with an English production company. It was called Hemdale. They made the movie, they made Salvador, and all of a sudden, boom, Platoon broke through. So I came from attrition at that point. I realized nobody ever, how many turndowns in Platoon had? At least 100, it never got made. Would never have been made except for a few courageous people, like Garrison says in the film. So I took the attitude that, no one's gonna really help me. This is not gonna, I was never made to be a Hollywood director, I guess. And I've struggled, you can't believe, just to make some of these films. By the time I made After the Doors, you saw how wild that was, and that really broke a lot of barriers and shocked some people. There was a lot of sex in the movie, a lot of drugs. Fuck it, I was showing the thing that I saw. I was living the life I did. So I wanted to just break these barriers, and I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to lie because I'd been through Vietnam, and I know that the lying doesn't work. Vietnam was nothing but lies. We were winning the war, blah, blah, blah. There was no friendly fire. People were, it was all bullshit. By the time I got to JFK, they let me get this far. So, like a guy who escapes from jail, you're gonna run as fast as you can. I said, this is gonna be it. I'll never work after this, but I'm gonna go for it. And I did. And surprisingly, we got some allies. Primarily, the Warner Brothers. I have to thank Terry Semel and Bob Daly, both the top executives at that time. They were the most successful executive team. one of the most in Hollywood history. From about 20, 30 years, they ran Warner Brothers really well. And they left in '99, which changed everything. But let's just say, believe me, those two men got this film through. There was a lot of resistance when Jack Valenti, the head of the VAA, saw it. He was shocked and said, "How can Warner Brothers release something like this?" They got
He
a
was
lot
a
of
menace. He was a
got-
menace, that guy. So many good movies were flagged and basically cut off at the knees because of
Well,
that guy.
I like Jack. I mean, I got to like him. I understood him, but he was working for Johnson, so you understand that he had a... And there was a big misconception. I never said in the movie, if you listen to it, it never says LBJ is... He is an accomplice after the fact, which he is, because he knew better. And he's been quoted already as saying several times to people who knew him, I know him, you know, we gotta keep this thing under wraps because it could lead to a nuclear war. That was his reason for the Warren Commission. If the truth comes out, if it's Cuba or Russia, or if he never got into the other part, but it's going to be it's a war situation. So that's his justification for the Warren Commission, and that's what he told Earl Warren, and he's told other people. But he knew something had happened because he was there that day. He heard the bullets. He knew he was being warned too. And right away, a day or two on that was Monday, I think it was. He was already making plans. Tuesday or something. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't been thinking about this film recently. It's been a while, but he was talking to these insiders about his commitment to Vietnam, which was the opposite of what Kennedy had done in 263. He did the opposite in 273, and it gradually builds up. Within 1 year, it was November 63. By the end of 64, he was building up in Vietnam. 65, when I got there as a teacher, he was sending troops, first Infantry and the Marines, 3rd Division, I believe. So we had a lot of combat troops. Kennedy never had a combat troop in Vietnam. He was always advisors, always advisors. Those 15,000, 16,000. He was peeling it back. He said it very clearly, we're getting out. But he couldn't say it publicly. He was among his people who knew. They argued with me. They said, "Oh, Stone is full of shit." The 263, they misinterpreted everything. It's just, it was so clear that Kennedy went to Vietnam in '53. He saw what the French fuck up was, and he said it. He said it to the Senate. He made a speech, and Adlai Stevenson, who was the big shot of the Democratic Party, admonished him and told him, you know, you cannot talk like this. Blah, blah, blah. This is not the way a young senator behaves. He was warned several times, but he was smart, and he would adapt. His language was sometimes ambiguous, call it that way. He had to be. You couldn't get elected in 1960 without having a Cold War attitude. No, there's no way. But he knew that, and he knew where this was going. And I think from 60, as soon as the Bay of Pigs happened, he knew that he was furious. He was furious because he took the responsibility for it. He says, "My government, this is my responsibility." But behind the scenes, man, he was furious, and he knew that he was fighting upstream against his own administration, his own military, CIA, the FBI. I don't know, the Secret Service. Anyway, the point is, Lyndon Johnson is not in my mind, but he was clearly had to go along with it. He had to cover it up because it was a world situation. But Johnson was a no good son of a bitch. I'm sorry, whatever. And he obviously was very happy to become president, but I don't believe that he was maliciously talking to Dulles or Angleton about this.
The sheer amount of information that is delivered in this movie is staggering, even for a long film.
I agree.
But it's fast. It's fast, and you know,
Too fast sometimes.
A mutual friend of ours, Christian Fraga, calls it the shortest 3-hour film ever made. 3 hour and 26 if it's the director's
Well, you
cut.
saw today we saw the director's cut, right?
Right. Yes.
Normally the film was 3 hours and 12 minutes. and I cut a few things, including the Johnny Carson show there, and the Bill Broussard, the whole business with Broussard, a lot of that was trimmed down. It had to be. And I still see cuts. I should have made it a little shorter. But, you know, anyway, you guys sat through the whole experience.
You have so many scenes where people are, it's exposition, it's information that's being delivered, but it's dynamic, it's rooted in the characters, but we're seeing what they're talking about as they're talking about it.
Yes.
And why did you do it that way is my question.
As I remember, we had no choice. We had too much information, but we wanted to visualize it. And thank God Donald Sutherland came along, because he's a wonderful actor and he talks very fast. But I think sometimes too fast. I think people miss some points.
I don't know if you were present when, did you hear that Donald Sutherland was, probably in the course of my entire life as a moviegoer, the only actor to have received a round of applause for a cameo?
You?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yeah, that was great. I saw him just before he died. Donald was a workhorse. He was really a workhorse and a wonderful actor. And didn't have the looks, but he used those looks. He used those looks very well. And he became a great actor. But everybody in the film contributed. I mean, from Jack and Lemon and Walter Matthau and
It was like a Billy Wilder cast reunion.
I enjoyed that part of it so much. Tommy Lee Jones, my God, he came out of nowhere. He was a bit on the, he'd been eclipsed a bit.
And Kevin Bacon.
Oh, Kevin Bacon.
Fantastic. You're a good-looking man, Mr. Gasson.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon kind of established himself there in a new way, and Gary Oldman delivered in his way. And I love the staff. You know, those guys really, they're less known, but that lady,
Laurie Metcalf.
Laurie Metcalf was unbelievable. Give a lot. She's the best at giving a lot of information.
And Michael Rooker calls people boss better than anyone. Boss. Yes.
Yeah, he's a Southerner. And Lou, Ivan, Jay Sanders is a strong, stout right-hand man. But you know, Garrison was stupid in many ways. He was just stubborn, and he fought with his staff too, because they had so many leaks, so many impossible to run a investigation into a covert activity. It's one of the hardest things to do in the world. Nobody knew about it then, and now it's easier, but maybe it's still very difficult to nail these people because they cover their tracks. You know, they make their labyrinth of secrets.
Well, there are so many moments in this movie that resonated in a very different way 30 plus years on. Like, you know, you got men like him walk between the raindrops. Men like you walk between the raindrops. You've seen a lot of walking between the raindrops.
Oh, sure.
You know, it's always the same as it ever was, to be sure. But then, you know, also, I haven't seen this movie in a while, and I don't know why I forgot that Kevin Bacon flat out says twice, fascism is coming.
Yeah, he was, I think, very, and why? Not because of one candidate from New York, no. Because it was ingrained into that system. It's a system that was of lies and deceit. And it was just don't tell the truth to the American public. And they can't handle it, you know, that kind of attitude.
Did you feel at that point in the late 80s, early 90s, even then, fascism is coming? Was that something you were
I will say this, when the Soviet Union fell, and I'd been behind the Iron Curtain, as I'd written the screenplay behind, when it fell, I felt like the same thing is going to happen to us. I just felt that, because now we had no enemy, so what are we going to do? And that's exactly what happened. We had to create a new enemy, which we created, and then we went back to Russia, and we went back to China now. It's crazy what we're doing. It's so crazy because we don't have to. We could have been at peace with everybody in the world. We really could have. We are a natural-born partner, but we have to be number one. That's the problem. It's not going to work.
We put out a call over the internet, which I hear is a system of tubes, for questions for you. And one of them was, what do you think, what, if anything, has been the biggest positive change since JFK was released? In the way the country is run? Yeah.
Listen, since Kennedy, I don't think we've had a good president. I think none of them have talked about peace. I never hear the word. I miss it. That peace speech is the most important speech he made. And the values of Kennedy are just lacking. It's a militant culture now, and presidents have to win at any cost. I'm really disappointed in the presidents that we've had, but it's not just the president, it's a system that's gotten more corrupt, because when something like that happens and you don't investigate it, it naturally leads to sort of a coarsening of the people, and their cynicism becomes encrusted. You must begin to investigate. You must find the truth, and this was the stupidest, the most obvious murder of all, because the evidence was so bizarre that we covered up. It was more work is done on an investigation of a petty criminal than they did on the president. So it was horrifying, and it was the worst moment. It just makes sense that Vietnam resulted, and that was a disaster. Every war has been a disaster. Everything we do in policy, except some domestic policies, everything we seem to do in foreign is like putting our paw in the glue pot.
Now we have two more from the internet.
Okay, why don't you give us another one?
So actually, one of them's from the internet, and one of them's from everybody who works here at the Texas Theater. What can you tell us about when you shot on Jefferson Boulevard, shooting at Oak Cliff, and shooting at the Texas Theater for this film?
We shot a lot in that. Well, I get confused because we shot Born on the 4th of July. Also,
Yeah, maybe just Jefferson Boulevard and the Texas Theater then.
And we used a lot of Dallas for Long Island for Ron Kovic's story. On JFK, we shot here first, all of Dealey Plaza, and that was a lot of work. You should have seen Dallas at that time. We closed off Dealey Plaza, and we had so much shooting going on. Dallas, the town was kind of, they
weren't happy with you all.
No, we had we got the permission from the board. It was a very close vote, 3-2, and we didn't buy anybody off. But it was just, what are you going to do with this Dealey Plaza? It's a jewel box. It should be a national monument and it should be preserved. But there are people in this town who want to bury the past and cover it all up. So they put up a museum which pretends to pay homage to the truth, but we know is not accurate at all. We shot from the 7th floor window. We shot from the 7th floor, which was the best we could do. Dallas cooperated with the people who showed up we had a lot of people in the film. They showed up because they cared and they were enthusiastic. So I felt like we were welcome here. I didn't feel at all like 1963. It was another time. And then we did talk radio, we did talk radio before Born, and then Born was a great experience. A lot of it was shot here, and then we moved to the Philippines. And then we came back here for JFK, and we were welcome except some people didn't like what we were doing, but most people, we were warmly welcomed, and the cast, the crew, everything was working until the media got onto it, and then they attacked. And we moved from here to New Orleans, and then from New Orleans we moved up to Washington. And then I came back for, as you know, in 1999 for a chunk of the film of Any Given Sunday, because Jerry Jones very kindly gave us a stadium to work in, because the NFL was adamant against the film, and they tried to make it very difficult for us to shoot.
This is a recurring pattern.
And it's my Pentagon. The Pentagon, yeah, okay. That's it.
Speaking of the Pentagon,
Yeah.
you mentioned the Sutherland cameo, and there's so many great lines in that. One of them is the organizing principle of any society, Mr. Garrison, is for war. And you and I have talked about this concept of the octopus, of this, it's beyond the military-industrial complex, I think. It's something else. And I wondered if you could talk about that, because it seems like this film, Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, Nixon, Snowden, and most, if not all, of your documentaries are, to some degree, about the octopus. What is it?
Well, come on, that's hard to. I called it the beast in Nixon, if you remember. I didn't use the word octopus. I like octopus. I mean, I think they're very intelligent animals. We shouldn't diminish them. Beast is the word. It's a beast, and it's a heartless beast. It's something that William Butler Yeats could,
Slouching
it's
towards
rough
Ben
and beast,
Graham.
slouching towards Ben. Yeah, that scene in the Nixon with Sam Waterston, that CIA scene, that's a deletion, but
With the
it's one of my favorite scenes. No, I think it does have a military-industrial. Eisenhower's speech at the beginning is correct. We started to spend big money, and we got used to the big money, and they don't want to go back. When you give something to them, they don't give back. It only gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that is a form of hormonal growth, or it's a steroid. And just as you know, the military budget here, it's mentioned at 80 billion. It went up to what, almost $1 trillion now. So,
And there's portions of it where we don't even know the amounts.
but inside the military industrial is the contacts. Inside our big corporations. It's mentioned by Sutherland, Bell Helicopter. You talk about General Dynamics. You talk about. There's 5 of those companies that really rake in a lot of big contracts, big money, and they have a lot of employees, and they have a lot of power, political power. And Congress is like our cow. They give them what they want. There's nobody who's able to audit the Pentagon, but nobody's able to really keep track of what's going on. It's technological. It's all over. And it bleeds into Wall Street. Because Wall Street has got huge investments in these companies. The only way to dismantle it is
Go ahead.
It's such a job to dismantle it. It takes an election by the people of a man or a woman who would be say, "Fuck you," and do it. And that would be the hardest thing to do. Takes tremendous courage. It's not going to come from Kamala Harris, that's for sure.
You and I talked about the tendency of presidents to make exorbitant promises about what they're going to dismantle or question, and then once they get elected, they don't do it. They don't do it.
Well, sometimes they get derailed. Like Gary Hart was a good possibility, and saw a lot of this stuff, and he was derailed, as you know, by sex. Who knows what happened? But some people say it's a trap too. It's a trap. It's very hard to go against this current because money is involved. Money is the American way. I would say one thing you could do is, let's take the money out of politics, but let's start with that.
That would be great. What would you say this movie did for you and to you in terms of your career?
I would say, it helped. It didn't help at the same time. It certainly blew me up into a figure that could be attacked a lot, and at the same time, it did give me bona fide confidence as a filmmaker, major filmmaker, and I could undertake big subjects. But there's always it brought me to another level, and my work continued to grow. I was taking chances with Natural Born Killers, and I kept taking chances on all these films. They were tough in so many different ways. I kept going, but I had my, my problem with Alexander. I killed myself on that film. It was a work of my lifetime, and I couldn't make the time in the editing. I just got derailed. But I liked the third version, which was done in 2007, which probably a lot of people saw it on DVD. That's all it is. It exists on DVD.
I hosted a screening of that and it was packed. Maybe, I said I hosted a screening of that in New York and it was packed. Remember you came for that. With that and Nixon, we showed them on the same day. It was, everybody loved it all.
2007.
Yes. Maybe we can show that here. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you learned from this movie, just personally? What did you take away from it?
Beware of the beast. You can't go there anymore. After 2001 and the patriotism in this country became really far more exaggerated than I'd ever seen it. And now the military, of course, became prohibitive in the sense that you could not make anything with equipment, Pentagon-type equipment, military equipment, without going to them and conceding your script to them. And of course, they don't agree with it. They cut everything that's controversial out of it, everything. They're ruthless. So all the military films are suspect unless they're made without Pentagon approval. You have to think that through. CIA plays a huge role too, whether you know it or not. They're all over these scripts. They know what's going on. And there was a CIA guy that they sent out here to Hollywood who did his job of cleaning up these things. And there's all these TV series that create this false notion of our goodness. And it's all over the place. It's part of the patriotism that came in after 2001 and George Bush, who comes from Dallas, right? But he lived here, I think, one part of it. Anyway, George Bush put us in the shithole forever. We never got away from that. That was I don't want to be the bad guy here, but I wish there was so many things went wrong. I can write about it one day, maybe.
Well, you've got another volume of your memoirs coming
Yeah,
out.
I'd like to try to do that before I go. I'd also like to do another film. The mood is turned against my kind of work.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's going to sound corny. It would be the first time I've been corny in your presence, Oliver, but your country needs you. I think they need this. I think they need this. This is one of the great American movies. And it felt the same watching it tonight as it did in 1991. I felt like new neural connections were being forged as I watched it. The way the story is told and also the message that it contains. So yes, please do it again.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Oliver Stone.
Why? You offering?
Alright, we're outside now. We've already changed the sign for tomorrow's show, Talk Radio. 35mm.